There are moments in life when you feel your heart leaning in one direction, while your mind stays perfectly still, a feeling suspended somewhere between liking and loving, a connection close enough to make you think, yet not clear enough to confidently name. You go about your days as usual. You talk, you laugh, you carry yourself with that familiar calm, and yet, somewhere deep inside, a small wave is beginning to move. Aquarius understands the value of freedom. You don't rush to label anything, especially your emotions, because once you name something, it becomes real, and reality always asks for courage. Maybe you're in a season like this right now, a quiet space between logic and the heart, between curiosity and attachment, between stepping forward or choosing to simply observe a little longer. So, what is truly happening within you when a feeling hasn't found its name yet? Let's slow down for a moment, take a breath, and begin where your heart is still hesitating. Aquarius. In a lifetime, there are emotions that arrive in a very particular way. They don't make your heart race. They don't pull you into a dramatic story. They simply show up, like a quiet guest sitting in the corner of the room, saying very little, yet enough for you to realize you're no longer in the same emotional space as before. You're still you, still rational, still aware, still keeping that careful distance from a world of feelings that can easily shift. And yet, somewhere in the middle of the most ordinary days, you begin to sense that something is changing, a glance that lingers in your mind longer than it should, a message that makes you smile for a few extra seconds, a name that appears in your thoughts more often than you'd like to admit. And then you ask yourself, is this attraction or simply resonance? Is this love or just a passing spark between two souls who want to be understood? As an Aquarius, you don't rush to label your emotions. You understand the weight of words like love, commitment, important. Once you name something, it stops being casual. It becomes intentional. Maybe that's why your heart chooses to slow down, not because you're afraid, but because you respect your own depth. You've seen emotions arrive too quickly and disappear just as fast. You've watched people call something fate after only a few encounters, but you need more than that. You need clarity from within before you give something a name. And that's completely okay. Emotion, like a sunrise, doesn't explode into daylight in an instant. It begins as the faintest line of light along the horizon. If you rush to call it morning, you might miss the beauty of the transition itself. Right now, there may be something in your heart that is still forming, not strong enough to become a promise, not deep enough to become a commitment, but real enough that you can't ignore it. You feel the warmth, and at the same time, you recognize that you still need time. Time to understand whether this comes from genuine connection or simply the desire to be understood. Time to distinguish between loneliness and love, between curiosity and attachment. Aquarius is often seen as the sign of the future. You think ahead. You see beyond the present moment. So when a new emotion appears, you don't just ask, what do I feel? You also ask, where could this lead? Does this align with the person I am becoming? That isn't coldness, it's self-awareness. Your heart hesitates to label things too quickly because you understand that a name can shift everything. It can change how you behave, how you expect, how you give your energy. And somewhere along your journey, you learn something important. Not every spark needs to become a story. Some feelings arrive simply to remind you that you can still feel, that your heart is still open, that beneath all the logic and independence, you are still human, still longing for connection. Maybe this season isn't about deciding. Maybe it's about observing how you respond, observing how that person appears in your thoughts, and observing whether this emotion expands you or makes you smaller. Because what matters isn't what you call it. What matters is who you become while experiencing it. If a feeling softens you, makes you kinder, makes you want to understand and be understood, then the process itself already holds value. You don't need to rush to a conclusion. You don't need to force certainty. The heart sometimes needs to remain in the not yet clear space for a while. It's in that in-between that you learn the most about yourself. So if right now you're carrying a feeling without a name, Maybe see it as an invitation to listen more deeply, to slow your pace, to allow yourself to feel without judgment. A sunrise doesn't need permission to become a new day. It simply needs time for the light to spread. And maybe whatever is forming in your heart needs the same. You're often misunderstood. People see that calm exterior and assume you're distant. They notice you don't rush to display emotion and decide you must be hard to reach. But only you know that inside, there's an entire ocean of thought. You don't step into a connection just because your heart skips once. You pause. You take a step back. You watch how they treat other people. You listen to how they speak about what they value. You sense their energy when there are no lights, no performance, no effort to impress. You need to understand before you allow yourself to feel more deeply. That makes you slower. Slower than the hurried rhythm of most people. Slower than stories that begin with intensity and quickly label everything as destiny. But your pace isn't distance. It's respect for your own heart. You know emotion carries weight. When you open up, you don't do it halfway. When you offer trust, you give it with honesty. So you don't call something love if it's only filling a temporary void. You don't call something fate if it's just a brief harmony between two curious souls. You understand that labels shift perception. They can change how you see things, how you expect, how you invest your energy. And you don't want to lead yourself into a story just because of a few beautiful days. Maybe you've opened too soon before. Maybe you believed in something before fully understanding it. And maybe you realized you were moving faster than your balance could handle. Those experiences didn't close you off. They deepened you. They taught you to ask better questions. What am I truly feeling? Am I drawn to who they are or to the idea of them? Do I want this connection because it feels right or because I'm afraid of being alone? Those questions aren't about doubt. They're about protecting your authenticity. Because once you decide to open your heart, it's not a casual decision. You'd rather stay quiet a little longer. You'd rather let a feeling remain unnamed than give it a title you'll later have to take back. That carefulness doesn't make you less romantic. If anything, it makes your love deeper. You don't love because you need a story. You love when you can remain yourself inside that story. And perhaps it's precisely because you don't open easily that when you truly step into a bond, it carries maturity, clarity, and a sincerity that isn't loud but steady. Moving slowly isn't a lack of feeling. It's how you make sure each step means something. And if right now you're still observing, still allowing your heart to wait for inner clarity, maybe this is simply how you're learning to love in a more conscious way. And then, somewhere in the middle of all that observing, within the slower rhythm you've chosen for yourself, there may be someone. Not entirely close, not entirely distant, just present enough for you to notice, present enough to make you think a little longer before you fall asleep, present enough to give an ordinary day a subtle shift in tone. There are no declarations between you, no clear definitions, just conversations that last longer than expected, silences that don't feel awkward, a quiet comfort in knowing they exist somewhere in your world. You feel a current there, but you haven't named it, because naming it means stepping into the frame, and you're still standing at the edge of that frame, watching. Maybe you ask yourself, am I imagining more than what's really there? Is this just temporary alignment? Or is something deeper forming that I'm not ready to admit? Those questions don't come from emotional absence. They come from emotional respect. You understand that not every connection needs to be rushed forward. Some of the most beautiful things in life don't begin with fireworks. They begin with calm. And perhaps it's that calm that unsettles you a little. Because it isn't intense, it doesn't sweep you away. It doesn't make you lose control. It's simply there, like an empty chair always available if you choose to sit. The uncertainty you're experiencing may not be confusion at all. It may just be transition, like standing at the shoreline while the tide is slowly rising. You don't see the change second by second, but if you remain long enough, you realize the water has moved. Emotion works the same way. It doesn't grow through promises. It grows through small moments, through the way they truly listen, through how you feel like yourself when you're around them. You haven't taken the next step, not because you don't want to, but because you're asking yourself whether that step comes from inner truth or from fear of losing something that hasn't fully formed yet. And that question alone reveals growth. Maturity isn't knowing everything from the beginning. Maturity is allowing yourself to stay in the undefined space without rushing to escape it. A seed beneath the soil doesn't hurry to break the surface. It needs time to build roots first. The most essential work happens in silence. You don't see the tree yet, but that doesn't mean nothing is happening. Maybe this connection is the same. Maybe it's stretching your patience, inviting you to listen to intuition instead of chasing adrenaline, teaching you the difference between excitement and peace. And maybe the greatest value of this season isn't what it will become, but what you are discovering about yourself. You're learning not to rush to fill empty spaces, learning not to turn a beautiful feeling into pressure, learning to honor your own emotional rhythm. The world may encourage clarity, labels, declarations, but the human heart sometimes expands best in open space. If you find yourself in a connection that doesn't have a clear definition, maybe the most important thing right now isn't an answer. Maybe it's awareness. Awareness of which feelings make you expand. Awareness of whether you're moving closer to authenticity or simply holding on to possibility. You don't have to decide today. You only have to keep listening, because sometimes the most profound things are not the ones spoken out loud, but the ones growing quietly inside your heart. On a deeper level, you may already understand why you're still holding this silence. When a feeling is called love, it's no longer abstract. It steps into the light, and light has a way of making everything clearer, both the beauty and the risk. A name can open the door to commitment, and commitment carries responsibility. Responsibility brings expectation, and expectation can make the heart feel fragile. You've always been an independent thinker. You're not easily swept away by temporary emotion. You prefer to see things from above, as if standing on a balcony, taking in the full view before stepping down into the street. But when something touches your heart, that reason is no longer an absolute shield. You still feel. You still respond. You're still moved by sincerity, by a glance, by ordinary moments that somehow linger. You simply don't want to gamble your inner peace on something that isn't truly clear. Maybe in the past, you gave your heart before there was enough foundation. Maybe you believed in a connection built only on early excitement. And maybe you had to learn how to stand back up when reality didn't unfold the way you imagined. Those experiences didn't close you off. They taught you that the heart deserves protection just like any other part of your life. You're not afraid of love. You just understand that love is a journey that requires real presence. So instead of rushing toward grand definitions, you pause. You observe your own reactions. You ask yourself whether this feeling keeps you steady or pulls you off balance. There's a difference between feeling something and labeling it. Feeling is a natural current. Labeling is a decision. And you know that when you decide, you don't do it halfway. That clarity can make you appear cautious. But internally, it's a quiet process of sorting what truly matters. You want a connection where you don't have to sacrifice who you are, where you don't have to shrink your dreams, where you don't trade freedom just to keep someone close. So if you haven't named this yet, it may not be hesitation. It may be self-respect. You're waiting to see if this feeling can stand steady over time, waiting to see if it's more than a passing wave, waiting to see if it can walk with you through ordinary days, not just the beautiful ones. Moving slowly doesn't weaken emotion. It builds a stronger foundation for whatever may grow. And if someone truly steps into your life with the same patience, they won't pressure you to rush. They'll understand that a mature heart doesn't open because of urgency. It opens because it feels safe. So if you're wondering whether you're being too careful, remember, discernment isn't a wall. It's how you make sure that when you move forward, you're moving from inner clarity, not from fear of missing out. And sometimes, and the bravest thing isn't saying, "I love you," it's having the patience to wait until your heart can say it with steadiness and strength. And after all the analyzing, the observing, the quiet conversations you've had with yourself, maybe the most gentle thing you can do right now is to stop trying to decode everything. Not everything that enters your heart needs an immediate definition. Not every feeling needs to be placed neatly into a labeled box. You're used to understanding before moving forward, used to studying the map before beginning the journey. But some inner paths don't appear on any map at all. They're meant to be felt. If thinking about that person softens you, even slightly, that alone is meaningful. If a conversation with them makes you feel lighter after a long day, that carries its own quiet value. You don't have to rush to turn it into a future. You don't have to convince yourself it must lead to something grand. Sometimes the deepest gift a connection offers isn't an outcome. It's who you become while you're inside it. Maybe you grow more patient. Maybe you learn to listen instead of react. Maybe you realize that beneath all your defenses, you still have the capacity to feel. Those realizations don't need outside validation. They belong to you. There's an invisible pressure in this world that every relationship must be defined, clear, labeled, heading somewhere specific. But the human heart doesn't operate like a contract. It's more like a garden. Some seeds sprout quickly. Others remain beneath the soil for a long time before you see the first sign of growth. If you dig them up every day to check, you might unintentionally damage what was slowly taking root. Allowing a feeling to exist isn't the same as drifting aimlessly. It isn't naive trust. It's a form of respect. Respect for your own rhythm. Respect for the honesty in each small shift of emotion. Respect for the fact that you don't have to follow anyone else's timeline. Maybe right now, you still don't know where this is going, and that doesn't make you uncertain. It simply means you're standing in open space. A space where you can observe how a feeling evolves over time. A space where you're not pressured into instant decisions. A space where you allow yourself to feel without self-judgment. If your heart feels warm, notice it. If you feel peaceful, honor it. If you sense a quiet hope, be gentle with that hope. You don't need to promise anything. Just be honest. And honesty is often the hardest thing. Honest that you care. Honest that you're afraid. Honest that you're not fully ready. Yet, you don't want to walk away. When you allow a feeling to exist, you give yourself a deep kind of freedom. Freedom from the pressure to understand everything at once. Freedom from having to prove anything to anyone. Freedom from the fear that if you don't decide immediately, you'll miss your chance. What is truly aligned with you won't disappear simply because you choose to move slowly. And if a feeling only lives for a short season, that season still teaches you something. Maybe it reminds you that you're still soft, that you still believe in connection, that beneath all your deep thinking, you still long to be understood. So instead of asking, "What is this?" maybe ask, "Who am I becoming through this?" If the answer is calmer, more sincere, more open, then perhaps you've already received its value. And sometimes the greatest freedom isn't walking away, it's staying with your own feelings, without forcing them to become something else. You may have begun to realize something through this journey. Not naming a feeling doesn't mean you're avoiding love. It may simply mean you're entering love differently, slower, deeper, more consciously. There was a time when you let emotion lead entirely. A single glance could shift your heartbeat. A small gesture of care could convince you that you had found something extraordinary. But time has taught you that not every spark needs to become a promise. Not every connection needs to arrive at a final destination. Now, you don't chase emotion like a sudden gust of wind. You pause. You sense the direction of that wind. You ask yourself where you stand internally before you raise the sail. That doesn't make you less romantic. It simply gives your love a stronger foundation. Because loving consciously means you don't lose yourself along the way. You don't sacrifice your values just to keep someone close. You don't shrink your dreams to fit inside someone else's narrative. You understand that a healthy connection doesn't pull you away from yourself. It expands you. There may come a time when everything feels clear from within, when the feeling no longer creates hesitation, when that person's presence brings not only emotion, but steadiness. And in that moment, the name will appear naturally, not because you forced it, but because you feel grounded. True readiness isn't loud. It's like waking up one morning and realizing you're no longer questioning. No dramatic scene, no outside confirmation, just a quiet clarity settling inside you. If right now you're still somewhere in the undefined, maybe that's the beautiful part, the part where you learn to trust your intuition, to listen to your body, to recognize the difference between what unsettles you and what helps you grow. Instead of criticizing yourself for being too careful, you might begin to see that you're evolving. Maturity is no longer loving to fill an empty space. It's loving because you want to share a life that already feels full within you. Maturity is no longer fearing loneliness so deeply that you accept anything. It's being willing to wait until a connection truly honors your worth. And if today you still don't know where this will lead, that doesn't make you weak. It simply means you're giving your heart room to breathe. Maybe in a quiet moment, you whisper to yourself, "I don't have to chase anything. I can feel without rushing to conclude. What aligns with me will stay long enough for me to recognize it." Feelings without names aren't meaningless confusion. They are subtle lessons. They teach you about boundaries, about patience, about self-respect, about the way your heart truly wants to be loved. And perhaps, in this undefined season, you're building a stronger emotional foundation than ever before, not to become perfect, but to become real. Because in the end, the value of a connection doesn't lie in its label. It lies in whether you remain yourself, steady, aware, and open, while standing inside it.